I uncovered a terrifying security tape that reveals a cursed shadow in my home. I never should have opened that door. There was something sinister lurking behind it. I can feel it even now. My normal life shattered in an instant. We all have routines, right? I was just another person, waking up to the smell of coffee and the sound of my dog, Max, scratching at the door. Everything seemed fine until it wasn't. The night was draped in a heavy, suffocating darkness. The kind that lingers in every corner, where shadows become monsters. My heart pounded in my chest as I stepped into the kitchen. The chill in the air cut through me like ice. The silence was deafening. I strained to hear any normal sounds, only to catch the faintest whisper, a soft hiss, just beyond my hearing. Then, I noticed it. The TV was on, flickering and glowing in the empty room, casting an eerie light. I wasn't watching anything. I had turned it off last night. My skin prickled as I approached, the shadows dancing on the walls as if alive. Each step felt heavier, the air thick with dread. Suddenly, a picture frame crashed to the floor behind me. I spun around, heart racing. Max had backed into a corner, his fur standing on end. He was growling. I held my breath, each second stretching into eternity. I glanced back at the screen. The tape was playing without me pressing play. The grainy images flickered and jumped. My mouth dried up as I recognized my own living room. I was there sitting on the couch, sipping coffee in utter bliss. Then something moved in the corner. A dark patch, slithering in and out of view. I leaned closer, squinting, and froze. It wasn't just a shadow. It was shaped like a person, creeping in and out of the light. My stomach twisted. Every hair on my body stood on end. Something dropped hard in the hallway. The noise echoed, like a heartbeat in a silent room. A creeping fear thrummed in my veins. My breath quickened as I gazed back at the screen. The figure was closer now. It twisted and turned, and the light caught it just for a moment. It had eyes. Dark, hollow eyes that seemed to pierce through the screen and right into me. Max barked, snapping me out of my trance. I whipped around. Nothing. The hallway was empty, but I could feel it. That presence lingering, stalking. The air felt thick, like the calm before a storm, the silence louder than thunder. I was on the edge, teetering between terror and disbelief. The TV flickered again. The shadow was gone from the screen. Just static. I took a step back, dragging in a breath, only to feel the cold sneer of the air wrap around me. The whispers returned, louder now, and I staggered back toward the door, the one I never should have opened. A loud bang echoed through the house. This time, it was definitely behind me. The door swung shut, slamming with a finality that sent shocks through my bones. I wheeled around, heart racing. Then, there it was, the figure stood in the doorway, dark and menacing. Everything went black. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. Everything felt suffocated in darkness. The world outside ceased to exist. My heart raced like a trapped animal, thundering against my chest as I strained to comprehend the shadow now spawned in my doorway. It stood still, a non-entity cloaked in night, and yet somehow I felt its gaze, a predatory awareness lingering on my skin. Max whimpered, his growls reduced to a whimpering plea. The courage I'd felt seconds ago dissolved like mist. I stumbled backward, desperate, hands trembling in the dim light. The air crackled with an oppressive tension, a warning from whatever unseen force danced just beyond the threshold of my spine. Stay back. I forced out, the words more a plea than a command. Eyes widened. I watched the dark figure twitch ever so slightly, as if my voice had stirred it. A slithering sound echoed from deep within the entity. Was it laughing? I couldn't tell, but the malevolence radiating off it sent shocking tendrils of dread through me. In that moment, I felt my sanity teetering, as if a single push could send me spiraling into an eternal abyss. I grabbed the crumpled remote from the coffee table, fingers fumbling over the buttons, seeking the lifeline of distraction. I pressed the power button repeatedly, but the TV flickered ominously, refusing to obey. Static permeated the air, climbing under my skin with a frantic, scraping noise, nothing like the comforting hum of the living room from before. Then, that voice returned, an otherworldly rasp, growing louder. "Come join us." It beckoned from the shadows, echoing through the halls like a mantra designed to pull me closer. "You won't be alone." Panic surged through me, and I backed away until my legs hit the couch, falling into it as if it could shield me. I wanted to scream, but no sound escaped, leaving me drowning in my own terror. The room felt alive, the walls shifting and contorting, consumed by shadows. Fragments of the cursed tape played in my mind like a relentless loop, the flicker of darkness, the hollow eyes, the movement that defied reality. With a surge of courage, I shot a glance toward Max. The dog trembled, eyes wide and glossy, fixated on the figure, as if sensing what I refused to acknowledge, that this wasn't mere imagination, but something insidious and real. A low growl emanated from deep within him, directed not at the entity at the door, but at something behind me. That I turned, realizing I wasn't alone after all. There, trapped in the corner of the room where the light struggled to reach, stood another shadow. And another. They multiplied like a sickness, dark silhouettes converging on me, their whispers crawling beneath my skin, igniting a fear sharper than any blade. Each new figure carried the same hollow gaze, a cascade of empty souls, their faces twisted in a grotesque mimicry of longing. "Join us," they echoed, their words weaving together like tendrils of smoke. Fury and clarity washed over me as the terror paralyzed my limbs. I wasn't about to be another nameless figure, lost in this nightmare. I lunged for the flashlight on the side table. The beam pierced the gloom, illuminating the wretched visages of the figures. They recoiled, shrieking in agonizing symphony of whispers that shattered the quiet. My heart raced faster at the very sound, but they would not be pushed away. The darkness thickened, a palpable weight pressing down on me as if the shadows were alive and writhing. I blinked, unsure of my vision, and refocused the beam only to find the empty space where the shadow figure had stood mere moments before. What had been a solid presence was now just a crawling darkness, seeping into my very being, trapping me in a waking dream. Panicking, I swung around in desperate search for escape. The door still stood sealed, the hallway a dark, yawning void behind it. Then I heard Ida jagged breath, sharp like broken glass, combined with the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Someone, or something, was getting closer. My mind raced with the possibility of what lay beyond that door. I had only a moment to make a choice, to find safety or succumb to whatever entity now haunted my home. Then, through the shadows, a single figure emerged, no longer just a shadow. This one had shape, detail, and the same hollow gaze that gripped my heart with icy nails. It spoke, this new arrival, the voice dripping with taunting pleasure. "You shouldn't have opened the door. Now, you're ours." And with that, the lights flickered and went out entirely. I was plunged into a darkness so deep it felt sentient, and a laugh echoed cruelly as everything slowly faded to black, leaving an unearthly silence that felt heavier than despair itself. My world had reduced to an absence of light, pierced only by the frantic heartbeat thrumming in my ears. In that suffocating void, time lost all meaning. I stood frozen, each moment stretching, contorting like the shadows that surrounded me, taunting my senses with dread. The absence of sight engulfed minute, just the absence of light, but the absence of certainty. What remained was a heavy air, dense with malice, swarming around me like thousands of eyes watching, waiting for my next move. I felt my skin break out in cold sweat, and yet, I couldn't move. I felt a strange sort of gravity pulling me deeper into the abyss. Then, a gust of wind swept through the room, unnatural and dry, carrying a foul stench of decay that wrapped around me like a shroud. My instincts screamed to escape, but I was chained to my spot, mind battling with my body. Despite the chaos surging within, I took a half step back, hoping to find solid ground somewhere, but there was none. "Can you feel us?" The voice slithered through the darkness, each word curling into my mind like a thief looting my thoughts. It was a multitude of whispers harmonizing into one, each carrying a fragment of despair. "So many have come before you, welcomed into this eternal night. The reality of their words echoed in the chambers of my fear. I had heard the tales, forgotten whispers of a cursed house that trapped souls, transforming them into shadows that roamed endlessly, never finding peace. Were these figures the remnants of those who had once occupied my home, now twisted into hollow reflections of sorrow? Before I could spiral deeper into despair, a faint shimmer flickered to life in the insurmountable dark. It was a pale light, feeble but persistent, a window to something outside this malevolent sphere. Desperation clawed at my throat. No longer focusing on the voices, I edged closer to the light, the instinct for survival overriding the paralysis of fear. But as I stepped toward it, the shadows shifted, coiling like serpents to block my path. I squinted against the dull glow, caught a glimpse of faces warped, tortured, with mouths gaping wide to unleash their cries. They seemed alive, filled with yearning, clutching at the air as if to pull me into their dismal fold. "Don't go," one of them wailed, reaching out with skeletal hands. "We can show you the truth. The light is a lie." I stumbled back, shaking my head, but the darkness responded with a surge that crashed into me. The weight of their despair pressed down, the shadows slithering along the ground, curling around my ankles, a binding embrace that threatened to pull me under. As I fought against their grasp, the light flickered steadily, swelling in brightness. It called to me, promising escape. "It's not what they say," it urged, sounding more human than anything I'd experienced in this house of horrors. "It holds a way out." As I broke from the shadow's grip, I felt something cold and clammy trail down my back, sending waves of nausea through me. How long could I resist? The air grew thicker with every heartbeat, and an intoxicating sensation filled my lungs until they burned, until I couldn't endure it any longer. The light was close now. Without thinking, I lunged toward it, desperation fueling my every move. I burst forth into its radiance, my body colliding against something solid, and I realized with a jolt that I had crossed into a small room. A sanctuary, or perhaps a trap. Before I could process what surrounded me, the door behind me slammed shut with an earth-shaking bang. The wind howled outside, echoing the anguished souls still trapped in the shadows I had fled. My heart thundered, and an icy realization gripped me. I spun around to find myself alone in this small room, with only a single flickering bulb overhead shedding a pale, sickly light. But I wasn't alone. I felt something lurking just beyond the wall, pressing against me as if longing to break free. And then, in a flash of horror, the whispering stopped, and a deafening silence fell over the space. Moments later, the wall began to shift, bulging outward under invisible pressure, the outlines of fingers pushing through the seams. Desperate shimmers of shadows began to swirl beneath that stretch, a cacophony of sinister murmurs rising in pitch, coiling around the room. "You think you escaped? The shadows have no end, and neither will your torment." Suddenly, the wall cracked, a chasm opening wide enough to swallow the light. A face, grotesque and familiar, emerged from the darkness, a reflection of my own. My heart plummeted as it smiled, the lips curling into a mocking grin that stopped my breath and sent ice through my veins. With an eruption of darkness pouring through that yawning abyss, I could only watch in horror as the face pushed forward me, face laughing with the haunting sound of emptiness. "Join us," it breathed as it reached for me. And the world spun wildly, as I felt the shadows take hold once more, drawing me back to the void from which I had fled. The light flickered one last time, then extinguished, leaving me enveloped in darkness, with only the echo of my own laughter spiraling into madness. The silence after the light snuffed out was suffocating, swallowed up by the weight of my own despair. I clutched my head, the mocking laughter rippling through my thoughts like a poison, spreading its venomous grip through veins that once pulsed with life. My heart raced in perfect discord with the oppressive darkness that encased me. Momentarily lost, I could only listen to that haunting chuckle, now a chilling echo spiraling through the void. Suddenly, the ground beneath me trembled, vibrating to some unseen rhythm as if the house itself were alive, hungry for my fear. The solid floor became slippery, an unsettling sensation that sent my feet tearing from the ground, forcing me to stumble backward, seeking something solid to cling to. Instead, I felt the chilling caress of a cold breeze wrapping around me, like a serpent tightening its grip with each frantic pulse of blood. The echo of my own laughter faded, replaced by a grating whisper that clawed at the back of my mind. "You cannot hide from yourself," it taunted. "You belong to us now." My veins ran cold at the realization that whatever awaited me outside this dark presence was no longer the sinister shadows of lost souls. It was something deeper, something that wore my own face. In a burst of adrenaline-driven clarity, I stumbled through the dark, desperate to find the unmarked door that had somehow sealed my sanctum of light. I could still sense that familiar weight, the unseen pressure at my back as the face of my tormentor slithered closer, merging with my own fears, wrapping me in a cocoon of dread. Digging my fingers into the wall, I searched frantically for any hint of weakness that could lead to an exit from this malevolent grip before it consumed me entirely. Then the whispers intensified, swirling around me, pulsing with a venomous urgency. "Decide. Choose whether to join the endless dance of shadows, or embrace the pure agony that is this realm of nightmares." Panic clawing at my throat, I pushed harder, and everything went eerily still. The shadows paused, as if they were waiting for my answer. Time stretched and contracted, and I felt the echo of countless souls watching as I prepared to utter some shattering truth, one that would grant me my salvation. But before I could speak, a sharp crack split the stillness, reverberating off the walls. The sound came from across the room, drawing my attention like a moth to a flame. There, far from me, an ancient mirror hung crookedly. The surface shimmered like murky water, drawing me toward its abyss. I felt an inexplicable pull, like the remnants of my own soul were now a mirrored reflection of that horrific face, beckoning me, asking for release. Dread seized me, forcing my breath to catch in my throat. I edged closer, and as the shadows coiled tighter around my form, I caught a glimpse of the room behind me reflected in that tarnished surface. It was a warped image, like looking through the glass of a broken portal. But unlike the darkness I faced, this realm appeared vibrant. Alive, faint colors danced along the edges, illuminated with a will of their own. Something inside me screamed for escape, for a chance at redemption. Yet each step I took ignited the flames of the shadows that flared around me. They shrieked in torment, rising in a frenzy, clawing at my legs to pull me back. I could feel my heart pounding in my ears as the faces of anguish twisted in glee, anticipating my yielding submission to their cries. "You cannot escape your fate," they chorused, their voices merging into an unholy symphony that resonated through my bones. Summoning every ounce of bravery left within, I turned my gaze toward the mirror. As I stepped closer, the reflection rippled, and the room beyond showed me a sprawling, sunlit landscape. Yet dark figures loomed far away, ready to seize the moment I stepped through. Could that be a real escape, or simply another layer of deception? Right then, the mirror cracked, lines spiderwebbing across its surface, unleashing a wave of furies blurred and restless. The shadows shifted unexpectedly, retreating, just a fraction before descending upon me as one, cold and clamorous. Now, their shrill keening pitch burned into my skin, a reminder that something inside me yearned for liberation, a thirst for absolution, for release from this torment. "Join us," the siren call sang through the cracks, now a howling wind that sought to drown out my thoughts. I thrashed against the shadows, attempting to break free from their relentless grasp. But I faltered, and in that moment, the mirror erupted. The glass fragments erupted in all directions, tearing into the air with deadly precision. I felt a sharp sting as glass pierced my skin, but it was the eerie presence of their grasp that made my soul shudder. I could no longer tell where the shadows ended and I began. In a final desperate act, I threw my hands toward the jagged edges of the broken mirror, crying out for release, when suddenly, time shattered with an ear-splitting crack. One last scream erupted from my throat, as I felt myself catch the brave edge of that celestial tapestry, but my grasp slipped at the moment of truth. I was pulled back, spiraling once more into the suffocating black. Then everything faded. The darkness collapsed upon itself, becoming the most absolute void. My last fleeting thought spiraled into nothingness. And then, in the heart of that unending silence, a low pulse of dark laughter welled up, proclaiming my fate anew. The walls roared back to life, and as I came to myself, I realized with horror that I was not in the room anymore, but standing in front of the mirror again. "Welcome back," it sneered, my own face twisting into the ghastly visage of despair as I prepared once more to surrender. And there, just beyond the glass, my reflection smiled with unfathomable hunger, a twisted form that promised to engulf me whole. "Shall we begin again?" it whispered, and before I could comprehend its intentions, I felt a tendril of darkness slip into my mind, igniting a new cycle of horror as my reality spiraled into an abyss from which there was no return. As I recoiled from the mirror, the world seemed to ripple around me, shifting and distorting, confirming that my fate was buried deep within its treachery. I stumbled away, gasping, as the walls of this forsaken room warped like flesh burning to ash. The sharp reflection of my other self lingered in my mind, its insatiable hunger burrowing itself into my consciousness, whispering promises of despair and temptation. But my instincts fought back, urging me to move. I sprinted through the decaying room, searching for an exit, a sign that hope was not lost. The shadows flared around me, writhing violently, eager to reclaim their lost prize. They lunged, but I cared little for their pursuits. My heart beat wildly in my chest as I collided with the door, shoving it open. I stumbled out into the dilapidated hallway, finding myself awash in darkness so thick it felt almost corporeal. My pulse hammered insistently, matching the staccato echo of my footsteps against warped wooden floors. My breath came in quick bursts, and as I descended deeper into this nightmare, I felt a chill creeping along the back of my neck that sent terror spiraling through me. "Get out!" I choked, but my own voice, a desperate whisper, barely escaped my throat. The air grew denser, heavier, pressing in around me like an unholy embrace. Unease twisted in my gut as low murmurs slithered between the thick shadows, a cacophony of sinister voices, each taunting me with fragmented recollections of my past, intertwined with spectral cries of lost souls grasping for release. "Help us," one gnarled voice rasped, dripping with malice, slicing through the air like a serrated blade. "You can't run from the darkness." It echoed around me, amplifying the bitter taste of despair in the back of my throat. That I halted, breath hitching, as I turned towards the source of that ghastly whisper, my heart dropping into a chasm of dread. It was then that I caught a flicker of movement in the dim light, a flicker that pulled to reveal a spotlight cast upon a sinister spectacle. It illuminated a broken camera sitting atop a dusty console table at the far end of the corridor, its lens glinting as if it possessed a will of its own. The screen flickered feebly, fizzing with static before displaying what appeared to be the remnants of a video time-stamped moments that stretched back to forgotten nights here in this macabre abode. Curiosity eclipsed my fear for a moment, and I stepped closer, compelled to watch. The images danced and converged, walls adorned with the remnants of forgotten lives, shadowy figures flitting through the darkness, their movements almost too quick to capture. My breath quickened, and a tremor of apprehension gripped me when I recognized a familiar shape amidst the flickering shadows. "What is this?" I murmured, dread clawing at my throat. The shadow bore an uncanny resemblance to the twisted reflection I had seen in the mirror, the ghastly form that wore my face. As I studied the flickering faces on screen further, a dawning realization descended, coiling tight around my heart. Each shadow was a story of its own, fragments of dread that had been enclosed within the house's sinister grasp. They were lost souls, their eyes wide with terror and pleading for deliverance, urging me to heed their warnings. But as I leaned closer, something else caught my eye. The camera lens panned, shifting effortlessly from one shadow to another, guiding me towards a single figure at the very back of the darkness, a figure cloaked in dense, swirling shadows that obscured its identity. The way it lurked sent a notion of icy fear dripping through my bones. Its grotesque form shifted, contorting in a mocking dance as it gazed directly into the camera, a predatory glint sparkling in its hollow gaze. The abyss stared back as I held my breath in horror. A low chuckling emanated from the speakers, each note reverberating within my chest. "I see you," it resonated. The sinister laughter peaked, and suddenly the screen erupted in static. The shadows beyond me lunged with ferocity, their visceral tendrils curling around my limbs. I screamed, but the sound was swallowed entirely, drowned amidst their terrible reach. I clawed my way backward, but as I stumbled, I heard the laughter morph into something deep Hera chant, a dark incantation that crescendoed through the dark void. Join us, embrace your shadow, your only salvation. The shadows writhed, pulling in close with a feverish delight as they threatened to swallow me whole. Just before I lost myself to their grasp, I felt the surge of resistance within me, a fierce flame igniting anew. In that moment, I turned away from the screen, determined to push past the encroaching despair. But then, with one frantic glance back, I saw the figure emerge fully from the darkness on the screen, grinning with a feral, delighted smile that mirrored my own, one that promised terror everlasting. It stepped through the screen, crossing the barrier between reality and shadow, reaching out towards me. "Welcome home," it mouthed, and the room echoed with its manic laughter as the darkness surged forward, swallowing every last flicker of hope in a furious tide. I stumbled back, the shadows grasping, as the last vestiges of light flickered away, leaving me teetering on the edge of that horrifying embrace. In my final moment, before surrendering to the encroaching void, my eyes locked on my own reflection in the shattered glass beside Metwisted, malevolent, my own soul devoured by the darkness. Before I could process it, I heard a voice just above a whispered breath surge through my ears, assuring me, "You won't be alone anymore," and then silence. I awoke to my own frantic gasping, entangled in the very same shadows that had hurried to embrace me moments before. The darkness lingered like a thick fog, wrapping around my limbs with insistent fingers, tugging me back into the depths of something I could scarcely comprehend. My heart pounded like a drum at war. Each beat reverberated in the stillness, echoing like a grim reminder of my survival. With trembling hands, I pushed up from the floor. The cold would slick beneath my fingers. Was it sweat, or something darker? The air buzzed with a palpable electricity, sending shivers spiraling along my spine. I blinked furiously, desperate to pierce through the veil of obscurity that clouded my surroundings. Strands of movement danced just beyond my reach. Then, I heard a low, guttural sound, reminiscent of gravel crunching underfoot, emanating from the corridor behind me. It was a sound that plucked at threads of memory, tugging me back to the malevolent laughter from the screen. Had I unwittingly crossed into its realm? Panic spiraled deeper. The very walls around me felt alive, pulsing with a grotesque desire to extinguish the flicker of hope still battling within me. That I turned, the hallway stretching out before me like a narrow maw, darkened by the shadow of something lurking beyond. Bile rose in my throat as the reality of my situation clawed at my sanity. Every instinct screamed for escape, yet my legs felt leaden, weighed down by the burden of what I had just witnessed. Focus. I hissed at myself, summoning every shred of courage left. I had to find a way to fend off the impending terror that sought to claim me. I turned and bolted down the corridor, determination igniting within me, each frantic footfall resonating with the echoes of a forgotten despair. The house seemed to shift, the walls closing in, warping around me like a grotesque spider's web. My breath came in ragged gulps, fear surging through me as I navigated the maze of cursed hallways, desperately seeking an exit that felt perpetually out of reach. I passed door after door, each one adorned with cracked paint and peeling wood, yet each time I approached, they remained stubbornly sealed, void of any promise of escape. The shadows responded to my distress. They clawed at my mind, wrapping around my thoughts, whispering insidiously. "Your hours," they hissed in sickening harmony, a chorus steeped in malice. Join us. As I stumbled through the darkness, I splashed through a puddle of cold water, the sensation jarring me back to the present. Daring a look down, my heart plummeted. The pooling liquid was infused with an unnatural inkiness, rippling at my touch, as if the essence of the shadows had formed a grotesque barrier against my passage. Suddenly, out of the murkiness, shapes began to emerge, rising up from the depths of the choking darkness. Twisted faces, known only through nightmarish reflections, began to materialize. Hollow eyes stared back, filled with desolation and anguish. They reached out, fingers stretching toward me, vowing despair and revealing secrets I feared I could never confront. That I scrambled away from the apparition and thrust myself forward, engulfed in a frenzy of panic. But the walls whispered cruel secrets that gnawed at my resolve, and the ground quaked beneath me as the shadows surged and slithered, beckoning me further into their malevolence. It was then that I caught a flicker from the corner of my eye, a familiar glint of light. The old camera's display flickered back to life, casting a sickly hue against the warped walls. Terrified, I hesitated, yet a compulsion stronger than reason drew me in. The screen presented an image, clearer now as the distortion receded. A figure stood there, familiar yet utterly foreign. It bore my likeness, grinning in that same predatory way, but now it was shrouded in a dense, shifting mist. It reached out toward me from the screen, as if to breach the divide between dimensions. A confident, seductive invitation. "Find me," it urged, voice a dark echo wrapped in a sugar-coated whisper. "You know where to look." Terrified, anticipation filled the room as I grasped the significance of its words. I was meant to confront something hidden in the recesses of this otherworldly nightmare. A glimmer of hope rekindled in my chest, igniting the urge to delve into those dark corners. Perhaps I could wrestle free from the clutches of despair if only I unveiled my own truth. But as I turned to chart a path deeper into the engulfing darkness, an unseen force pulled at my back, yanking me off balance. I stumbled, nearly falling, as I twisted around to discover the shadows swirling faster, forming a cyclone of despair, ominously hovering at the edge of the screen. "Join us," echoed through the hall, drowning my thoughts in their taunting chant as they lurched forward, their icy fingers closing in, and just as they were about to seize me, a crack formed in the fabric of reality. A violent fissure ripped through the darkness, spilling shimmering light that flickered like fireflies. The apparition grinned wider, revealing sharp teeth as it cried out above the chaos. "You can't escape what you are." The earth trembled as the shadows shrieked, and before I could fathom the horrors about to ensue, I was thrown backwards, not into the darkness, but through the rift into a blinding light. That I landed hard, gasping for breath as everything spun around me. When the world settled, the atmosphere crackled with tension, and to my utter horror, I found myself not in another place, but back in the room with the mirror, my own face staring back at me, shadows circling at its edges, waiting, and then it smiled back. The room warped as I stood transfixed before the mirror. A malevolent grin stretched across my reflection, as if it were no longer a mere reflection, but a portal into my own twisted soul. Shadows cascaded down its surface, pooling like ink at the base, ready to slither forth at any moment. My heart hammered against my ribs, a desperate attempt to get free of this nightmare. But the terror had set its claws deep. "Look at me," it spoke with a voice like shattered glass, each word laced with cruel mockery. "You think you can run from me?" Frantic, I stumbled backward, desperate to escape the chaotic symphony of reflection and taunts. Yet my own eyes captivated me more than I wished to admit. They glowed with a predatory hunger. I felt as though I stood on the verge of understanding a truth that was going to shatter my already tenuous grip on sanity. "No, this isn't me," I protested, hurling myself toward the door, tugging at the handle that had betrayed me before. The instant I grasped it, a surge of cold shot back through my fingers, gripping my wrist with a vice-like force that echoed the squeezing shadows in the mirror. I screamed, the sound reverberating down the hall. Swallowed by the malevolent whispers that buzzed just out of earshot, I yanked my hand away, and the pain burned. One glance back at the mirror revealed my reflection had shifted. It was no longer just my face, but another figure stood behind me, now dark and contorted, fingers clawing from the glass, gaining substance by the moment. Caught in a still frame of horror, I turned to face this new terror. The creature, once a mere periphery in my nightmares, now loomed closer, a dark mist coalescing around it like tendrils of smoke wrapping tightly around a dying flame. Its eyes glinted with malice, and as it opened its mouth to speak, a chilling sensation enveloped the room, freezing the air to the point of breathlessness. "Why did you leave? You let me down," it sneered, each syllable laced with sadness and fury entwined. The sound twisted in my ears, a mournful lament that clung to my heart, urging me to weep. Gritting my teeth, I took another desperate step back, towards the wild chaos of the hallway, but I was trapped. The air thickened and twisted, The shadows pulsed in rhythm to my frantic heartbeat. Suddenly, I recalled a fragment of the cursed tape I had viewed before, an image of the very mirror I now faced. It flashed in the recesses of my memory, an ancient, dust-covered winding of the reel that distorted, framing an image of a past that held my essence. Something far darker than this creature stood before me. Don't you remember? They waited for you just like I did. It hissed, its breath smelling of decay and despair, a pungent reminder of all that I wished to forget. Tears streamed down my cheeks, but I forced myself to breathe, to anchor myself amid the suffocating oppression that sought to pull me under. Why are you doing this? I asked, my voice trembling yet resolute. To free you, it replied, its eyes narrowing, flashing dangerously. You are mine. The shadows whisper your name. They need you closer. It stepped forward, limbed with that inky essence, an entity stitched together from pieces of memory I couldn't name. It reached out, barest of fingertips brushing the surface of the glass, as if to find a way through. Before I could comprehend the terrifying implications of its words, a sudden lurch drew me back. Momentum pulled at my core as the reflection rippled, distorting like a lake struck by a stone. I gasped in horror as I witnessed a figure emerge, a facsimile of myself in a spectral dance, uncoiling from the mirror with an unnatural grace that I fanned out, a multitude of copies blurring in and out of existence, all smirking in unison. Join us, let go of the pain, that I found myself stumbling, the shadows closing in, dread clawing at my insides. One by one they advanced, all wearing my face, feeding off each whisper of despair I held. I was a puppet failing to cut the strings. The mirror consumed my resolve while they converged. Stop! I screamed, thrusting a wild hand against the mirror in a desperate attempt to shatter this cycle. But a shrill shriek erupted from the depths of the glass, and suddenly, the air erupted into chaos. The shadows screamed, as though the very essence of existence shattered, crashing around me. With a sweep, darkness swallowed the room, and I felt the floor vanish beneath my feet. I plummeted into a silence so profound it threatened to deafen. An electric charge sparked before me, illuminating my fall, and I seized a chance to escape this relentless purgatory. That I reached out for the light just as it flickered, but with a jarring collision, the ground met me, engulfed in a choking fog that clung to my limbs, squeezing tightly as more figures emerged, faces and bodies morphing into a collective torment that bore witness to every sin I had ever committed. And as I writhed in fear, they whispered all at once, their voices intermingling in a cacophony. He's here, he's waiting for you. You have unfinished business. Then I caught sight of the ascendant darkness shifting behind them, forming an ominous silhouette, a towering figure that eclipsed the feeble light surrounding me. It stepped forward, revealing itself beyond the tumult of writhing shadows, its eyes two smoldering embers, fiery and unyielding. Welcome home, it rasped, voice rough like gravel, pulling me deeply into the folds of horror I never dreamed possible. And then I saw my hands covered with the inky darkness of the pool I had splashed through. As I stared in horror, they began to lift, beckoning towards that familiar embrace. The pain in my chest ignited. This was no escape. I was ensnared once more, each heartbeat echoing against a crescendo of laughter that threatened to drown me. And with one last push, I leapt into the shadow's grasp, feeling the world turn to the void. I was no longer running, but sinking deeper into the abyss, and everything went black. Fingers of mist twisted around me as I succumbed to the darkness, a suffocating embrace that stifled reason and frozen memory. My body felt weightless, as though suspended in the black void. The laughter receded, replaced by a soft, sinister whisper that curled through my mind like smoke through a crack. Wake up! It was the same voice that had haunted the mirror, but now it dripped with a sugary sweetness that was more grotesque than comforting. You have much to learn. Suddenly, vivid memories began to erupt within the darkness, splintered visions of laughter mingling with ash, faces of strangers flashing past, their eyes hollow, unblinking. The shadows around me flickered with each grotesque memory, illuminating the truth wrapped in sorrow. I saw myself as a child, bright-eyed and innocent, standing in front of the very same mirror, reverently tracing my fingers over its polished surface. I was filled with wonder, oblivious to the darkness that lurked beneath the facade. That joy began to twist as I was thrust deeper into the Memoria's shadow loomed behind me, creeping like a venomous snake, its long fingers curling around the nape of my neck. I screamed, a sound lost to the abyss. But the shadow remained, a figure etched into the corners of my mind. "Da, you remember now?" The voice cultivated by mist replied, dripping with malevolence. "Leaving you was never an option. You invited it, after all." The pressure of the void intensified, yielding a sudden surge of light that erupted around me, banishing the darkness momentarily. My eyes adjusted, and I found myself standing once more in the old hall, the cursed mirror looming in front of me, its surface rippling with an energy that felt alive. I should have felt relief, but the sense of dread lingered, heavy like condensation pregnant with rain. The room was transformed. Shadows writhed along the walls, twisting into grotesque figures that shifted between sight and obscurity. With every step, the floorboards creaked in lament, whispering warnings to leave, but I was rooted in place, a moth drawn to an insatiable flame. The mirror pulsed rhythmically, and trapped within was a paler version of me, an echo of my existence, suddenly rife with desperation. "Help me," it croaked, hands striking the glass, leaving streaks of ichor that coalesced with every frantic plea. And I tore my eyes from this fractured reflection, glancing around. The figures dancing in the shadows, flickering specters woven from despair, watched me intently, as if waiting for a cue, eyes wide and hungry. Their whispered voices coalesced into a mantra. "You know what to do, join us." And oh, I shouted, grappling with the icy tendrils now closing around my heart. My breath was a shallow fluidity, buoyed between fight and flight, the primal urge to flee at odds with an insatiable curiosity tugging at my subconscious. "What do you want from me?" 1,000 lips whispered in unison, accusing and relentless. "You think you can sever ties? You think freedom is possible? This is only the beginning." The walls seemed to pulse in rhythm with their chanting, throbbing with each beat of my heart. The air grew thick and electric, each breath laden with shadows, suffocating my resolve. I stumbled backward in a panic until my back hit the mirror, vibrating beneath my touch, sending ripples coursing through the reflection. Just then, something solidified in the glass. A tear began to form, oozing like a wound, dark and slick. It widened, birthing a hand that reached for me. Fingers clawed as they pulled through the surface, dragging forth a figure that sent icy fingers of despair down my spine. He emerged with a flourish, a malevolent force dredged from depths I longed to forget. His visage was grotesque, a malformed imitation of humanity marred by grief and rage. "You thought you could escape your past?" he hissed, the voice resonating from within the very marrow of my soul. "You brought us all here. You owe me." Blinded by terror, I only understood that each breath exposed more of the past to me. Twisted memories wrapped around my psyche like chains, raking at the fabric of sanity. The cries of the shadows crescendoed, transforming into a choir of anguish that overwhelmed my senses, demanding retribution for choices I couldn't even recall making. Frantic, I pressed against the mocking reflections warping the mirror's surface, when the pale version of myself turned its horrifying gaze toward me once more. Its eyes had turned black, nefarious orbs devouring light while whispering in sweet, venomous tones. "You can't escape what you area." Key to every door cursed. In that moment, everything shifted. The world around me began to contort, bending and twisting until the shadows bulked, and I began to feel my identity fracturing, like a broken mirror reflecting shattered pieces of existence. The more fear and despair I gave into, the more they clung to me, bloating my essence with their torment. Brandishing a newfound desperation, I turned to the abyss, the dismal figure that gestured toward a path of shadows shadowing my fate. "You want freedom?" it taunted. "You want to shatter these chains? Accept your truth." A choice must be made, and just as I felt my resolve waver, the phantom echoes of laughter spiraled around me, choking off the last threads of my sanity. A voice as ancient as the shadows whispered, consuming my thoughts like a ravenous beast. "Everything you seek is a heartbeat away." But as I stepped forward, the ground beneath my feet trembled and tremored, splintering with a low rumble. The mirror burst open, and as I lost my footing, A blinding light beckoned before me. The creature erupted from the mirrored surface with furious intent, forcing me backward, splaying out its myriad hands, desperately reaching for something only I could see. "You cannot leave. Not without me." And then darkness surged through the shattering glass, enveloping me as a weight pressed down, dragging me toward the unfathomable unknown. In my final breath, I realized that perhaps freedom was a lie, a cruel mirage. The abyss swallowed me whole, ushering with it a deafening silence, and the last sound that echoed in my mind was the taunting of my own reflection whispering in relief, "Welcome home." With that, I plunged into the depths, face to face with the shadows I had unknowingly become part of, and I could feel them slipping through my fingers, leaving me utterly alone in an everlasting nightmare. The darkness enveloped me like a shroud, an inky void that whispered and rustled around me in conspiratorial tones, promising secrets hidden deep within the recesses of my own mind. It reached out, eager to entangle me further in its malevolent embrace. I drifted through an endless expanse, weightless yet heavy with dread, a specter of my former self. Then, as suddenly as it came, the sensations faded, and I found myself launching back into reality. I gasped, the air around me sharp like shattered glass. I lay sprawled on the floor, heart pounding, surrounded by familiar jagged shadows cast by the soft glow of my dim overhead lamp. I blinked away the remnants of a fractured dream that clawed at my consciousness. But the mirror I shot upright as the memories of my other self poured back like a torrential storm, overwhelming yet eerily familiar. It was still there, standing defiantly against the wall, its surface as glassy and treacherous as ever, shuddering as if responding to my frantic heartbeat. Slowly, I gathered myself and rose to my feet, stumbling toward it, compelled by a strange force. The mirror's reflection shimmered, bending and rippling like a troubled surface of water, and I gazed into it, my breath hitching. Something was different. Where my own face should have been, I instead saw flashes of fleeting images, a hallway, dimly lit, a child's laughter echoing against the walls, and then the shadow. It stood just beyond the edge of sight, lurking, its features obscured but unmistakably present. My breath stilled, a whisper of recognition washing over me. I turned sharply, every inch of my spine tingling, expecting to find the malevolence lurking in my periphery. But the room was empty. Silence enveloped me, a false veil that concealed an impending onslaught. My instincts screamed at me to leave, but the pull of the cursed mirror was unbearable. I wanted to unravel this mystery that now clung to me like a second skin. With a trembling hand, I reached out to touch the mirror's surface. Cold static leapt at my fingertips, sending a jolt through my body. I froze, feeling the air thrum with energy. Something inside me yearned to connect, to understand the torment that echoed back in twisted reflections. As my fingers brushed the surface, vivid images exploded before my eyes, catapulting me into a series of eerie scenes. I stood in that dimly lit corridor, where the laughter began, each laugh a precious jewel that shimmered, yet they quickly corroded, turning to screams drowned in darkness. The shadows thickened, and I saw myself retreating, leaving behind friends twisted in despair. Their faces began to buell, petals of pain caught in the tangle of shadows. Suddenly, the laughter morphed into a guttural gurgle that seemed to arise from the very depths of my soul. I staggered back, but the connection was unbreakable, an anchor tethering me to the horror. Weight of memories pressed down on me, and from the corner of my eye, I noticed a flickering, the presence of something. Emerging from the darkness was the figure I had glimpsed in the mirror, its outline shifting and contorting, pulling me deeper into its seductive embrace. I felt as though my fate was intertwined with this being, a manifestation of agony and regret. "There's more," it crooned, voice a haunting melody that resonated through the hollow echo of my mind. "You haven't seen it all." I recoiled, fear coursing through my veins, the air thickening with an oppression that made it hard to breathe. "Stay away from me," I yelled, but my protests were swallowed by the growing shadows that flickered like candle flames caught in a tempest. The figure smiled a slow, knowing grin that carved deep into its sunken features. "You think you can sever what's deeply rooted?" In that moment, framed within the swirling vortex of swirling darkness, I saw flashes of forgotten faces. Friends, family, each contorted by the malevolence I invoked. I turned, overwhelmed by the need to escape, to rid myself of the ill-fated connection to this haunted reality. But just as I began to flee, time seemed to freeze, the air crystallizing as if seconds were stretching into an eternity. It was then that the shadows converged, spiraling into a vortex, pulling at the threads of the space around me. I felt a visceral jolt, the sensation of being drawn into a vortex keen with pain. The suffocating space began to compress, its pressure engulfing me. "You cannot leave." A cacophony of voices echoed, sharper than knives. My heart raced as the figures behind the mirror twisted into grotesque mockeries, wailing in unison, each cry vibrating in discord. I lurched forward, desperate to escape their grasp, when the icy fingers of the shadow reached for me, ensnaring me. "You needed us." The voice sang sweet like poison, everything fading into an indiscernible blur as I tumbled backward, plunging into the very depths of despair that welcomed me anew. "You are never free." In a frenzied gasp, I slammed my eyes shut, every fiber of my being pushing back against the tidal wave of terror. Just as the shadow's grasp tightened around my throat, I felt the ground shift beneath me. With an explosive force, the mirror shattered, shards erupting like parallel boulders into the room, spraying razor-sharp reflections that caught my terrified face. It was only in that moment I realized the horrific truth. The reflections weren't my own. They were remnants of those I had left behind, screaming into eternity as I stood paralyzed, drawn ever closer to the abyss. And just as the last shard fell into darkness, I found myself standing alone in the fractured void. The shadows whispered once more, a serpentine promise that sunk deep within my psyche. "Oh, you see now?" Unseen eyes glared into my very soul, and as a new sound crept up from behind soft, sinister laughter, I realized too late that the chaos was only beginning. The figure that once seemed far away was now beside me, a ghastly apparition extending its hand with a haunting offer. "Shall we dance?" As I stood in that desolate void, a maw of shadows wrapped around me like tendrils of smoke. The phantom beside me twisted its lip in a smile that chilled my marrow. It was wavering, its color deepening to an obsidian hue, and I felt a pull-in, almost magnetic force that beckoned me toward its dark embrace. This was not the escape I had hoped for. My head spun, swirling with echoes of laughter that haunted my core, while my gut churned with abject terror. "Join us," it crooned, the shadows encapsulating my feet, forcing the ground from beneath me. Behind it, faces of anguish materialized, silhouettes of those I'd known, those I'd lost, now rendered as hollow memories, their haunted eyes pleading for salvation, or perhaps retribution. "They need you to remember," whispered the crowd of shadows, their voices a chorus of despair that wormed its way into my psyche, prickling my skin with familiarity. "And oh," I screamed, heart racing. My defiance was outweighed by the dread coiling around me. I felt the memories surge within, turbulent waves crashing against the dam of my sanity. Bursting forth came visions, an eternal reel of lives intertwining with my own, paths I had raised, and friendships I had betrayed. It slammed into me all at once, a deluge of recognition sweeping like a tsunami, drowning out the rational thoughts as I spiraled deeper into the morass. "Remember," the figure shouted, twisting now, red eyes penetrating my very essence. "Remember who you really are." With each syllable, a sense of blistering clarity lanced through me. The memories became tangible specters sweeping into my consciousness, each telling a tale that I'd forgotten in my quest for reprieve. Betrayal, fear, torment, they all bore my mark. Suddenly the shadows quaked, flickering as the worst of all my memories coalesced into one vivid, imagious, soft, innocent face that I knew too well, my own. It filled my heart with an anguish that I could hardly bear. "You abandoned us," it whispered, as if the innocence of my childhood was now a stranger, its light dimmed by the darkness that enveloped us both. Gulping, I gazed into the depths of my own reflection surrounding the grotesque entity. I wasn't merely plagued by ghosts. I was becoming one with them. The darkness wasn't outside. It was entangled in my very being. And then it happened that a horrific realization washed over me. The shadow's laughter was mine. Every whisper of despair that ricocheted off the walls and echoed through the hallways belonged to me. I had become the vessel for the sorrows and regrets of my past. I had welcomed this haunting into my home, opening that door wide with an invitation to linger. "Help us," echoed from the shadows, faces now rising from the inky darkness with desperate eyes wide with anguish. "You are the key. You must make a choice." But what choice could I possibly make? I felt fragmented, torn between the memories and who I thought I'd become. Yet, the darkness urged me to choose one foot in the light, one in the abyss. I had unraveled, now forced to confront the wretched truth. I had opened the door for the very thing I feared the most, myself, and oh, I screamed, recoiling from the darkness wrapping around my limbs. I fought against it, desperately clawing against walls that felt alive, their whispers molding into a singular chant. "Join us." With a stuttering breath, I steeled my resolve, somehow remaining anchored against the tsunami of memories. "I will not be your puppet," I shrieked, heart pounding madly in my chest. The shadows recoiled with furious shrieks, though they yearned to reclaim me. They wrapped tighter, but I summoned every ounce of defiance left within me. "I am not afraid," the figure laughed, hauntingly familiar, skeletal features contorting with an unnatural glee. "Then you are ready to embrace your true self," it rasped, and all at once, the shadows surged to life, towering over me, a cacophony of dark energy, a hideous tide threatening to drown me whole. "Embrace who you are," it cried, and in that instant I saw it all. The swirling shadows that had once terrified me transformed into a mirror reflecting every facade of betrayal I had propagated, the friends I had left behind, the family I had abandoned, the innocent girl haunted by the lie of who I had become. Tears filled my eyes, and I cried out in agony. "No, I can change. I can be better." But deep down, I feared that maybe this darkness was me. And then came the dreadful moment where their voices combined into a singular clarity, threading through my heart like a dagger. "You chose this. You will never leave this place. Enough," I bellowed, inwardly fighting the reality fracturing around me. I didn't want to accept this twisted reflection. I just wanted to help them, to siphon away their pain, and somehow reclaim my own lost light. And then, as waves of darkness crescendoed to a sharpened point, a blinding realization ignited in that heartbeat of clarity. I understood I had to face this darkness and accept it. Holding on to the shadows meant holding on to despair. To confront it would mean shattering the chains that bound me. I breathed in deep, allowing every sliver of darkness to wash through me. From the ghostly whispers of my heart to the depths of regret and loss, "That I accept you," I uttered, my own voice trembling, yet resolute. "All of you." The figure froze, senses sharpening, and the cacophony of shadows fell silent, with my words echoing like hymns. Each fragment of despair within me lit up, the darkness turning to light, refracting into a prism of renewed clarity. The shadows howled then, rage consuming them, their fingers trailing away now, but I didn't yield. I stood grounded, feeling their energy surge through me as my resolve crystallized. I summoned the courage forged in this fragility, and with one final push, I opened my arms, ready to stand on my own, true the phoenix rising from the ashes of my own destruction. And then the tension broke. With an earth-shattering fissure, the void erupted, and as the space around me cracked open, I was pulled through. The darkness gave way to a blinding flash of light, casting fragments across the ether, showering me with flickering sparks of hope. I gasped as I was birthed anew, the air around me resplendent, vibrant with life. Yet a fresh wave washed over me, a deep silence that echoed beautifully in the hollows of my heart. But the shadows weren't gone. As I sank to my knees on cool grass beneath a cerulean sky, grounding myself anew, I turned back toward the darkness where I had come from. And behind me, a cruciality began to form, a depth within the shadows that pulsed with promise that it would always be there, lurking just behind the light and ready to swallow me once more. A stark reminder of the struggles that lay deep within. And with the lesson enfolding me, their laughter faded into an eerie chant, a reminder as my heartbeat echoed in harmony, "You will always belong to the darkness." As the realization fell into place, I stood slowly, staring into the abyss with a blend of acceptance and fear, my breath shallow and taut. I felt alive yet hauntingly incomplete. But then, flickers twinkled overhead, a constellation marking my path forward, a chilling statement lingering at the edge of my consciousness. No matter how far I ran, I could never truly escape what lived within. My last thought crystallized in my mind, leaving a chilling clarity with the unseen whisper dancing through the wind. Welcome back to the dark, it was always a part of you.